And I don't even know what that means when I'm not. I always am. I think I always will be. I think I always have been. I don't think I've been the same for more than 15 minutes. Um,
Well, that'll be exciting to watch in the next hour.
and well, I don't mean physically changing, but
Oh, of course not.
if you're alive and you're curious, then you're always changing because you're always getting more information, going down some rabbit hole or another. That's what it's all about.
All right, I'm gonna do my interrupting thing. Okay, 1 second. You'll be back on.
When I met my wife, one of the first conversations we had, and this was really crazy to me, was we both said we rather be lousy than mediocre. To us, just existing would be the worst thing that could happen to us. And I think that's what you're saying with different words. Because if you don't feel it, what's the point?
Well, if you get challenged early, I think that's the secret. I got challenged early. My parents got divorced when I was very little. We went to live in England for a year, and then we went to live in Florida, and then we went from barefoot school outside in St. Petersburg, Florida, to New York City. So immediately I got that life was not always going to be the same.
And were you soaking that in?
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. It's like, hey, what else is going to happen? I mean, it's like it's a movie.
100%. And I really feel like that was a manifestation of who you are.
Well, I consider it a very lucky thing that happened to me. I've had a lot of wonderful experiences in my life, and they've been very useful. I was sent, I guess my mother thought I wasn't going to turn out to be a proper young lady, which was a very intuitive concept. And so she sent me to a Maryland boarding school to be a proper young lady. And I did learn how to pour tea. That was
Very useful.
very useful, right? But then I went back to New York and I went to college for 2 years. And then I decided that really what I wanted to do was be an artist. And my father said, no, you have to go to Vassar. And I said, no, I don't, which was a very important thing to do in my life because it was the first time I had really stood up to him and said, look, I know that I'd like you to pay for it and everything, but I don't want to be that kind of woman in the world. I want to go to Parsons School of Design, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but that's what I want to do. And so his reaction to me was, okay, if you get in, I'll pay for it. Because I think he didn't believe that I really would follow through and that I could do it.
And
So I did.
so, what would you say to everyone watching who want to do something very badly, but their ego is always telling them, now's not the time, you're not qualified? How did you pursue your passion in that moment?
I have not ever really listened to anybody else. I'm afraid. The minute my father, the best lesson he ever gave me was his favorite saying, which was there's only one way to do things. And at that point, I clicked off. Whatever followed that, I just clicked off. Like, what do you mean there's only one way to do anything? I am going to spend my life proving to you that there are a million ways to do things.
So from a really young age, your opinion was the only opinion that really mattered.
Whatever it was that I wanted to do was what I was not going to be stopped to do. If you have an idea of something you want to do, that's really important. A lot of people have no idea at all what they want to do.
Whether you succeed or fail.
But if you've got something you want to do it. Do it no matter how many people tell you you're crazy, you're incompetent, there's no way you could ever succeed. Do it anyway, because what you're going to learn from doing it is what's the next step.
Even if it's not right for you.
Even if it's not right. And
'Cause
the
it-
thing is, one of the great things about doing what you want to do is that you learn very quickly what you like and what you don't like.
And even if you find out what you don't like, you've
Important.
moved ahead.
Very important to know what you don't like, and very important to get out of it if you don't like it. Don't ever stay in anything that doesn't do it for you. You're not going to grow. You're not going to develop. You're a secret to yourself until you start really listening to what you're reacting to.
You're a secret to yourself until you start reacting to what you're really feeling on the inside.
Yeah, what is it?
out of your
Why
head.
did I want to go to art school? Because there weren't any rules. Because it was the 70s. It was the 60s, 70s.
What was your favorite medium?
Photography.
And do you still do it? Or
And I
you
still
just...
do it. Yeah.
Oh,
Actually, it led me into a whole bunch of other things. I loved photography because my mother ran an old master drawing gallery.
oh.
And I really wanted to learn how to draw. But when you grow up with Raphael and Michelangelo, in the room next door, it's like, I can't do that. I don't want to compete with that. But I fell in love with photography. And I had a great photography professor who was a protest photographer. And so he did crazy things like, okay, I'm going to send you on a school trip. You're going to Jackson, Mississippi, because they're having a race riot there. And I can't go because I'm too well known. His name was Ben Fernandez. He was a very well-known protest photographer in the 60s. But you all can go.
And
So
did you go?
You're going to go. Well, you don't tell your parents exactly what this school trip is all about. You say you're going on a school photography trip. And can I borrow the car? So we go to Jackson, Mississippi, and we're driving down the main road of town, and there's like not another car on the road. Like, what's going on here? There's something going on. There were 6 of us from school. A Chinese guy. We were all hippies. So we go to the end of the road. There's a diner. So we stop to park the car. We go inside, and the guy looks at it and says, "What are you doing outside?" I said, "Why shouldn't we be outside?" "Well, they're having a gunfight across the street. Have you noticed that there's nobody out on the street?" And I said, "Yeah, I did notice that, but I didn't hear any gunshots." And at which point he pulls up his rifle and puts it on the counter. And he said, "You be careful. You're all white people from up north. We're having a little race riot here. This is not going to be a very easy place for you to move around. So be very careful what you do."
Wow.
That was my introduction to protest photography. It was great. So as a result of learning about photography, I then decided that I wanted to get into something really new and different that was involved with a photographic medium. And I had just seen some guys from California put an exhibition on of laser photography called holography. And I took one look at it and I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. I thought, well, but what am I going to do? Nobody knows anything about this. And I had spent the last year at Parsons. I went to Parsons School of Design, studying the history of photography. And it was very hard to study because there wasn't a lot of material around. And I thought, this is a brand new medium. This is going to revolutionize the world. This is a medium that suspends a 3-dimensional object made out of points of light in space, We've never had a medium like that. This is going to revolutionize the way we think, the way we create, draw, build houses,
Psst.
everything.
Hologram.
So I thought, we need to start collecting this stuff now while it's just being done by scientists and thrown in the back of their drawer and maybe get lost. No, this should be saved. This is really important. It's the birth of an entirely new medium. So what I
Holograms.
decided needed to be done was to start a museum. So I was 26, and I don't think I'd been in a museum in my, well, maybe I'd, like gone to the Met once.
Sounds like you lived in one, though.
Yeah, I sort of lived in one. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to start a museum for holography. I'm going to collect this stuff and exhibit it, and people are going to know about it. And so 2 years.
What year would have this?
I'm sorry?
What year was this? Roughly.
About 1974.
Okay.
So 2 years later, on December 12th, 1976, Mayor Abe Beame opened the Museum of Holography in Soho. See, one of the things that I think has been the most valuable to me is that I don't think about things as being difficult. I don't think about it. It's just not something I think about. I want to do it. It's like, okay, I'm going to do it. And people say, but how did you do it? I just kept moving forward. I don't know.
Don't think about it and just keep moving forward. Everyone, right now, with anything you really want to do at this moment, Posy's telling you, don't think about it and just keep moving forward. And then I would add, don't even judge yourself at the speed that you are moving forward. Even if a single day doesn't feel like you've really accomplished anything, if you're working at it, you are accomplishing. Right. You are moving forward. Don't let that voice inside of you say, see, here's another day you didn't get anything done. Use that to propel you even harder and faster to move forward.
I started a museum in Soho in New York
26.
City at 26 years old with one other person. There's a great thing about naivete. There's nothing there to stop you because you are so uninformed. You don't have any idea how hard it's going to be.
Exactly. You haven't thought of all the obstacles.
Yeah. And so when they come, they're not really obstacles. So Kathleen, who was my best friend in art school, and I opened the Museum of Holography, which was great until Kathleen was sick one day and I had to go to the bathroom. So who takes the admission at the museum when I'm in the ladies' room? So I realized, okay, you can't have a museum with two people. So I hired another person. So we had three of us. We actually got up to 10 staff in there. And one of the last people I hired before I took off to do something else was a wonderful guy who worked at Cooper Hewitt. He was a young guy. He was a Cajun from Louisiana, wonderful guy. And we were working on an exhibition that explained what holography did in the real world, how it's a testing device for non-destructive testing for airplanes. And, it's beginning to be used in advertising, and it's a security device, and it's a wonderful art medium. And so I figured, all right, I can't do all of this and run the museum and raise money and all this. I've got to hire somebody. So I hired this guy from Cooper Hewitt. He was a young curator there. And we're working on this show, that big exhibition that has a lot of corporate sponsors. We introduced MasterCard to holography. That's why they had that little dove on their card.
Wow.
We introduced the guy who ran American Banknote to holography so that it was put on passports and, security devices. Anyway, we're working on the catalog, and Renee looks at me and he says, "You're just making all this up, aren't you?" And I said, "Renee, everybody makes everything up."
Everybody makes everything up.
Well, if you're the first one to do it, who are you going to copy? There's never been a museum of holography before. So you have to figure out, what a catalog is, what kind of information has to go in on for each image that you're putting in the catalog. So you borrow from other fields, but essentially you're out there making it up. You're the first one who's trying to figure out how to make a catalog entry for a hologram. So, and he just looked at me like, "I can't believe you're doing this." I said, "Why not? Somebody has to do it. So we're doing it. This is what we're doing."
My favorite line, Posy, my whole life, I've never been qualified for anything I've ever done.
Exactly.
Because once I get qualified, then I'm totally bored.
Well, once you're qualified, someone's going to say, "But you can't do this, that, and the other." It's like, don't try to stop me.
It's like overthinking it
Yeah.
when you're just starting out. If you place those constraints on yourself, no one's going to believe you. You have to believe it. Like you were saying, you basically have to be oblivious, so focused that the no's, the nots, and can't do's aren't even in that maniacal
Right.
path that you're on
Right.
to get to where your dream is or to get what's right in your heart.
And because we didn't know that how much work it was to put an exhibition on, we planned 4 exhibitions a year with like very little money. We did them.
You got it done.
We got it done. Hundreds of people came to the museum. There was a thing in the museum world. This was around the time of the King Tut exhibition.
Oh,
And
we went to that.
did you? So we were being investigated like every other museum in New York. Are you selling things in your bookstore that are 100% related to your collections and your purpose, or are you just, coining it in the bookstore? And they were particularly anxious to figure us out because of all the museums in New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, everywhere. We were number 2 in the support that we got from selling holograms. The Met was number 1. And here we were, this goofy little museum in Soho, and they just couldn't believe that this was legitimate. Well, we were the only one in the IRS's report that didn't have to stop selling something because it was irrelevant.
Oh my
It
God.
was amazing.
So let me ask you, does something end in your heart and you go look for something else? Or does something else show up and you're finished with the previous chapter of that life?
Well, part of why I left, which I'm assuming was what that question was, is because I was just burned out. I was working 24/7, 365, and
Right.
I didn't take vacations. And there were competent people who were taking it on. We had a board, we were legitimate, we were a member of the American Association of Museums, we were there. And to me, building something, creating something is always the most interesting part. So once it's there and it's like moving along, it's like, okay, so what else can I do? It's not that I got bored because I still love holography, but it wasn't as exciting as the creative thing of making it happen. Also, at the time, I fell in love, And so I married this guy who had 3 kids, and he was a stockbroker. And he decided he's not your average stockbroker, needless to say. And he decided that he'd always wanted to live on a boat. Hey, great idea. Let's go live on a boat. I mean, we had given all of our lives to our various jobs, the 2 of us, and we decided, if this marriage is going to work, then we've got to give ourselves and this marriage some time. So let's get a boat and let's travel around and let's be together and see what happens
On a boat.
on a boat. Yeah. Had I
Hold on,
any
hold on.
idea how to do this? No, absolutely none. He was ex-Navy, so
Oh,
he
he knew.
knew what was going on. So we bought a trawler, which is, a beamy sort of, it had 3 cabins. And I didn't know anything about it, but I could read charts. I loved charts. So I got into navigating. I took a course from the Coast Guard to figure out how to navigate. And so we headed south because it was September. It was getting cold. So we headed south. We went down the intercoastal. It was amazing. The world that opens up to you when you live on a boat, when you travel the waterways of this country. You see cities in a completely different way. You gravitate towards 18th and 19th century cities because they were built around the water. And I had not, as a New Yorker, traveled very much. I went to Europe, but I didn't go to America.
Exactly.
So I didn't know anything about the South. It was absolutely fascinating, to pull up at a dock where 2 generations of a family have been shucking oysters. And they let you spend the night on the dock, and you get to watch them all do their thing. And plus, they give you piles of oysters to eat. I mean, we had such amazing worlds open up to us by living on a boat.
So,
I have a couple comments, but I don't want to interrupt.
1 second. So, did you ever say, this is what my life is going to look like when you were, say, in your early 20s?
No, I had no idea what my life was.
And you had no desire to know?
It never occurred to me that it was something that I could know. It's just there were a lot of opportunities out there. My mother had run an art gallery, so it wasn't any big deal for me to run a museum, no problem. A boat, that was something a little different, but I mean, I caught on to it. And the fascinating thing, you find something very quickly that fascinates you, no matter what you do. And what fascinated me was the world that was. That it's a completely different world apart from what I knew before.
That's going on simultaneously
Going on
to
all
your
the time.
reality.
Yep. And you stop at a town, and what's fascinating is how do you find out what's going on in that town, what's going on in that city? You go to a hardware store. You go to a food store. You go to the local diner. How do you find out where the hip places are in town? What makes these people want to live here? And you become a sort of private investigator.
Was there any town that you said, maybe I'd settle here in those days on that boat?
I didn't find any towns on the way down the intercoastal really that I thought, oh my gosh, I really want to live here, because I was so in love with the explorer.
Right.
Wow, what's going to be around the next corner? I didn't know anything about the South. And living on a boat is always fascinating. I mean, imagine going up I'm trying to remember the name of the river, and I feel like an idiot that I don't remember where Washington, the Potomac.
Okay.
So there's a marina right next to Lincoln Center, or not Lincoln Center, the
Jefferson, Washington
Kennedy
Monument,
Center. Is that
Kennedy.
right?
No, Kennedy Center's
Whatever it is in Washington.
okay.
And we were both ballet freaks, and there was a ballet going on. So we thought,
Oh, it would be at the Kennedy Center. Yeah.
let's go. So we get dressed up, we go get in our little dinghy, we leave the marina, we go up to where the Kennedy Center is. We literally tie off to the Kennedy Center, climb up the facade, and walk in and go to the ballet.
Oh,
It was so much fun. And the marina is right near all the museums. So, I mean, it just was a wonderful way to arrive in Washington by boat, you know.
absolutely.
So cool. And in terms of worlds, probably the most amazing world was going down the Mississippi.
Why?
Well, the tugboats have their own language, they have their own etiquette. I mean, they are traveling, they're pushing 49 tows. It's like a New York City block going up the river. And if they don't know what's coming around the corner, it could be big trouble. And so they keep in touch on the radio all the time, so they know where everybody is within a couple of miles of them. And when we first originally got on the radio, I'd see this boat. It's the Black Warrior. Black Warrior, Black Warrior. This is the quick step. He wouldn't answer. I thought, oh, maybe I have to say where he is. So I look on the chart. Where could he be? Oh, you're at such and such light. And I would call out. He didn't answer. I'm like, what is the problem? So then I'd try the next light.
What was the name of your boat?
Quick step.
Quick Step.
It was a very slow boat. So I called Black Warrior, Black Warrior, Black Warrior at Indian Point Light. Oh, this is the Black Warrior. Come back. Go to a working channel. We go to a working channel. He said, you were driving me crazy. I wanted to answer you, but here's the rule here. If you don't say exactly where I am, I can't answer you, because then everyone else on the river will think I'm somewhere I'm not. And that will lead to a problem if they think I'm around the next bend and I'm really 5 miles away. You have to be very accurate in describing where you think I am on the river before I can come back to you on the radio. I mean, it's like, okay, got that. And they used to, within 2 or 3 days, everybody on the entire Mississippi knew about the little white yacht boat. That's what we were known as, the little white yacht boat. And what I didn't realize is all these tugboat captains, when they retire, want a little white yacht boat to retire on.
Of course.
And the Mississippi, you can't just anchor in the Mississippi. And because the water level goes up and down so often, there's nothing to tie off to. So you've got to call the tug captains and say, where are you going to stop? Can we tie up to your toes? Because what they do is just ram the toes up into the mud. A couple of the guys hop on shore and lash the thing to trees. And then they start building their little 49 tug thing. And so the only place that is stationary that you could spend the night is lashed onto one of
those. Wow.
toes. And they thought that was a cool idea because, of course, at 5 o'clock, they get to come on the boat and have a drink and check out how you live. Plus, they know all the good restaurants anywhere around and the name of the taxi cabs to call. So we had the most fabulous time going down the Mississippi. It just was They're heroic people. They're really wonderful. And again, it's this whole new world that you have to sort of catch a drift of. Who knew that we would be experiencing something like that?
So Posy, go ahead.
Just okay. Do you want to read the comments?
I can read a couple comments.
Okay.
Right at the beginning of the show, John said, "I'm thrilled to see my friend Posy on the show."
John
And-
Larned.
Right.
Soham said, "I don't like rules either."
That's my wife.
Let me see. Steve Barry says, "I lived on a 47 Viking for 7 years, the best of times." He also said, "She has done one of my bucket lists."
Well, we lived on a 49-foot Grand Banks trawler, which we bought secondhand and sold third hand for the same amount of money
Oh.
10 years later. And eventually, I mean, we would pick up the kids in college, and the vacation for 2 weeks would be, well, we're going to go to the Bahamas. What are you going to do? You're going to retire with a bunch of blue hairs. This is ridiculous. What are you doing? Well, the first Christmas, they flew down. We had scuba gear on board. We took off. We spent the night in these little islands. We scubaed with whales. It's like they got it. It
They
didn't
got it.
take them too long to figure out that this was a great adventure. So we went to Turks and Caicos, and we went all around all the islands in the Bahamas. Fell in love with the island of Exuma. And so that was sort of our home base. But then we would, the Bahamas wouldn't let you stay there permanently all year round. So you had like 8 months, and then you had to get out. So in the summer, when the kids were in college, we would come back up to the East Hampton area, pick them up, take them to Labrador or Newfoundland, or we went up the Hudson River through the Erie Canal, through there's a whole system of canals and just an amazing voyage you can take and end up in Chicago.
How much did you learn about yourself
Oh,
on
wow.
that odyssey?
You learn a lot about yourself after you've been like the museum director in New York City. That's always good for a conversation. What happens when you retire at 38 from being a museum director and you're the wife of a guy and you're on this boat and you meet another couple? What do you talk about? What you all used to do? Everybody's retired. Nobody wants to talk about their old jobs. And so who are you?
So let me ask you, did you define yourself as a museum director?
No, I didn't know
No,
what
no.
to say.
No. Before you began the odyssey.
Oh, I thought it was pretty cool that I was 26 and that I was running a museum. Yeah.
Okay, so
And I'm a little bit shy, and so that was a good way to start a conversation with people. But to walk onto a beach with 6 or 7 other people, what do you talk to them about?
what did
Who
you?
are you? You
Right,
know?
exactly. So what did you learn? How
Well,
how did
I
you see
learned
yourself?
not to identify so closely with my job that I became a non-person. I became a job title instead of a person. And I learned a great secret, which is that everybody is fascinating.
Everyone.
Everybody is I don't care what they say. In fact, the people who say, "Oh no, I'm really boring. There's nothing interesting." Within 20 minutes, I guarantee you, I will have found out something about this person
Be-
that is life-shattering.
Because there's no coincidence that person came into your life because of what you were projecting. There was some message from that person that you wanted to hear. My grandfather, who we dedicated our foundation to, and his whole generation, actually, He always said to me, you treat the guy that cleans the street as well as you treat the president. Until someone does something to lose your respect for them, you respect everyone, regardless of their profession, because that's not who they are. And they've come into your life. He didn't say this. He ended it there. But then I began to realize, and this is what started me on my journey, and this is what always kept me to have the curiosity level that obviously you have,
Yeah.
to learn. Like, I know I'm here. So, and I began to really make the shift from life as this drudgery in prison to this miraculous divine gift that even the negative things that have happened to me in my life are all part of the gift. And then I took the next step and made the negative things something to celebrate, because all those negative experiences kept waking me up and waking me up.
That's right.
And then I love I, we say it a million times, I could really be comfortable just being.
You know, they have an expression in seminary that you minister through your wounds.
That's a whole nother topic that we
And
need
I
to bring
never
up.
really understood that. But yeah, the things that have wounded you are the things that are the most precious parts of you, because it's your vulnerability, it's your greatest learning,
It's your source of
it's
compassion
your source
for
of compassion with other
someone.
people. And everybody has that weakness. Everybody has that bruise. Everybody has been through something. And when you can click onto that, you got a conversation going.
Posy, I think you're the first guest that's ever steamrolled one of my interruptions. So you've set a new precedent. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Can you hear Will's?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about your reverend, right? So
Not this week, but she was.
Oh, she was. Okay.
Well, I guess I'm a retired reverend the way a doctor is retired.
Right.
I don't give up my love of helping people or wanting to hear about them or open them up or help them through a crisis, or talk to them about God. Um, I don't give that up because I'm not working in a church anymore.
So do you
For
remember
s-
what you said to me? Go ahead.
Yeah, for someone. So this is fascinating to me. For someone who's lived their whole life outside of the box, in their thinking, in their emotions, in their actions and interactions, how did you become a minister in a religion?
Do you remember?
It's a really good question. I discovered God in the Bahamas, and every time I say that, I think about my friend Louise, who was a cab driver in Exuma. She was also a mystic, and she would say, she asked me at one point, "What are you really doing here? What are you looking for?" And I said, "I'm trying to find God, Louise. I have friends who know God, and who that makes them is someone that I want to be, and I haven't got any idea how to get there." She said, I wish I could do the Bahamian accent as well as she can. "You think God lost, man?" Yeah, I really did think God was lost. She said, "You're the one that's lost.
Right.
Look around this island." I mean, Exuma was the most amazing island. People they lived so close to God. They talk about God all the time. They talk to God all the time. And I started having experiences on the island that drew me closer. I got to know a young guy who was a Baptist minister on the island, like most of them were. And Bailey and I went to go to his church because he gave great sermons. And one day we're walking in and he says, "Here, take my Bible. You're going to need some of the references." They all carried Bibles to church. So look up the references, you know. I said, "Okay." So I'm taking his Bible. It's got all kinds of little notes in it. And I'm so afraid I'm going to open it up and stuff's going to fall out. And he's going to be angry at me for losing stuff. Anyway, he seats us, since we're the only white people in the church, in the front row.
Nothing obvious about that.
Well, it's because he was so happy to have us there.
Yeah, exactly.
And
But how
So-
wonderful he gave you his Bible.
he gave me.
I'm really intrigued by that. Go ahead.
So I have his Bible in my lap.
Yeah.
Bahamian services, by the way, standard 3 hours. Oh, yeah.
A lot of singing.
A lot of singing, a long sermon. So this Bible is hot.
Fire and brimstone kind of
Oh, yeah.
sermons. Yeah.
Great preaching. Martin Luther King kind of stuff. I'm holding this Bible and it's hot. I thought he must have left it on the wall and the sun made it hot. Well, you know, an hour into the service,
Still
it's
hot.
still so hot that it's uncomfortable on my leg. And so I'm shifting it, and Bailey's looking at me, "What are you doing with this guy's Bible? It's hot." And he's looking at me, like, "What are you talking about? It's hot." So when the service was over, I asked the minister, I said, "Your Bible was hot." He goes, "What do you mean hot?" I said, "Hot, like
Temperature wise.
hard to touch."
Right.
And he just smiled and he said, "Have you ever read the Bible?" I said, "No." He said, "I think you might want to start reading it." That was all he said. But then also Louise, being a mystic, and she's my best friend, and I got into herbal medicine with her. She would take me into the bush and teach me all this stuff. So I began to understand that God really wasn't just a word, that God wasn't a person. God was a thing. It was
Everything.
everything. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. So I got more involved in the church, which caused some problems in my marriage because Bailey really wasn't into it.
How did you address those problems?
You know, I'm not really good at being sympathetic with other people's inability to get something that I can get. I tried really hard. I mean, he was, oh, what do you call it?
Agnostic.
He wasn't really agnostic, but he didn't come from, I was a cradle Episcopalian, whatever that meant. It meant my parents made me go to church. But also at 10 years old, living in New York City with my mother, I walked 5 blocks to an Episcopal church every Sunday. I was the only one in the family that went to church. No one told me to do it. I don't know. I was drawn to it. That was one of the things.
So
So I got more and more involved in the church and understanding the church. And I did some work with them. In the summer, I would teach the kids swimming in the church school environment.
hold that thought for 1 second. I just want to go back. When you were 10, did you just go to mass every Sunday, or were you involved in the church community?
No, I just went to church and then I started singing in the kids' choir.
Okay.
So I guess the singing is really what,
Right.
but no one told me go to church.
No.
I mean, to this day, I have no idea how that all happened, but it happened. You know, there's a little string inside all of us that's being pulled towards the inevitable things in our life.
Our journey.
Yeah. Whatever our special journey is, And it's just going to happen, and you're just going to respond. And it'll happen more gloriously and more wonderfully than you can possibly imagine if you don't question it, if you just go along with it all.
Or you don't make any conditions, or you don't
Yeah,
judge yourself,
right.
or you don't place too much value in time.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter when, just as
It's
long
just what's
as
happening.
it is
It's
just
just an adventure, you know?
our whole thing with I Love I is to simply be. And it's the most powerful tool you have on this planet. But you're taught the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
you're taught like everything is a 1 + 2 = 3. And the reality is that's sort of a viewing yourself as separate from God or the source, when you can just view yourself as not being separate and just 100% part of it.
And you're being guided. You're being
right, the
guided
strength that you're
because
saying.
this force that's guiding you created you. And so this force knows how to get your attention. It knows what your gifts and skills are, and it's trying to guide you into the most wonderful life that you could have. Why would you want to interrupt that? Why wouldn't you want to have the most incredible life? Why wouldn't you listen to everything whispered in your ear? I mean, yep, you're afraid of being outside the box.
Fear.
Yeah.
Boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom.
But life is really all about listening to all that stuff. I mean, why were you put into my life? We don't know that yet, but we may well figure it out in time.
There is a lady that we have been inviting to come to be on the show. And then we invited her to come to our Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have a very unusual meditation. People will come say they've never experienced anything like it because there's some light physical stuff. And then we do a quasi guided meditation. And then my wife finishes it with a gong bath.
Oh, wow.
And the breathing and light physical stuff that you do gets you very, very like aware. And then you go into this guided meditation, and for whatever reason, this bond energetically, and is the reason why we own the property, like just allows you to be. And then the gong bath just solidifies
Wow. The
everything.
vibrations.
The
of that.
vibrational
Yeah.
healing
Wow.
is like your reward for doing those other two things.
I mean, we're not taught. In fact, we're even almost guided away from this
100.
kind of.
Well, so this lady finally said,
You asked me, why did I, in my out of the box life, how did I end up doing something like being an Episcopal priest? Well, I felt myself getting closer to God, to understanding what God really is, as opposed to a person with a capital G, When my marriage fell apart, I thought, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I was taken out to dinner by the Episcopal priest on the island and 3 Baptist ministers. I should have known something was up. And we're sitting there at dinner, and
God wasn't letting you out of that one.
no, and they're looking at me and they're going, so when are you going to go to seminary? I said, listen, I am the least holy person I know. Nobody would accept me at seminary. What on earth are you talking about? They said, you started a business with a Bahamian friend to supply food to the indigent and the aged on the island. Don't you think there's a little bit of a ministry involved in that? Ministry? Ah, what are you talking about? Yeah, and it never, I hadn't looked at what was happening to my life, that I was beginning to devote myself to teaching kids, to being with the elderly. You know, we started this social service business actually on the island called Our Father's Business because nobody was doing it. It just seemed like the logical thing to do. And I'm a starter. So started this little business. So these guys are going, we need to take you up to your bishop in Nassau and tell him what you're doing on the island. You need to become a minister. Scared me to death.
But you went.
I go with the Episcopal priest, go into his office. And this is at the time in the 90s when there was a minister who was gay who was going to be a bishop, and it was like a big brouhaha in the Episcopal Church, and this particular bishop in the Bahamas, so conservative that he was in charge of all the African bishops who were very conservative because most of them were brought to Christianity during the most conservative religious time in the 19th century. So not surprising. Anyway, he sits me down and he says, why do you want to be a priest? I said, look, it wasn't my idea. These guys told me I should come talk to you. He said, well, they speak very highly of you. I understand totally why you want to do this. You tell me why I should have a white woman who's been married twice and is now divorced, who is not a Bahamian citizen. Why would I send you to seminary? I said, that's a good question. I have no idea why you would do it. And that was pretty much the end of the interview. And I thought, guess that took care of that.
I'm not
Well,
going.
no, the ministers called him up and said, no, 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 no. This is how it works in America. You have to go to seminary under the aegis of a bishop, but you don't have to keep her. You don't have to bring her back to the Bahamas. He had, of course, never ordained a woman, and wasn't planning on doing it really soon, apparently, and didn't really want me as a very liberal American back in his diocese. But I think they convinced him, you send her to America to seminary, she'll find somebody else. She doesn't have to come back, but get her off the island, I mean, do yourself a favor and put her on track. So he said, okay, you go look around. Look around. It's like, what do I know about seminaries? So I talked to some friends and they said, well, go, there's one in the South, Sewanee, and there's one on the West Coast that's run through Berkeley, and then there's one in the middle. There's one in Boston and Chicago. And I didn't want to be up north because I'd lived in the Bahamas for 15 years and I wanted to be warm. So I went to Sewanee, which is like Disney World in
what way?
terms of the Southern University. And I took one look at it and I realized I am the only female on this campus, not in a dress, who does not have long fingernails and big hair. I ain't going to make it here. So that was it for Sewanee. Then I went to Berkeley and I thought, that is too outside of the box for me. I don't know what to do with that. But I liked the idea that I had to step over homeless people to get to the chapel. That said something to me about the kind of place that it was. So I went to Austin, Texas, and it's this very liberal Episcopal place, but it's sort of under the radar. It doesn't have, a big deal. And I like the fact that it was joined with Well, they believed in Hispanic ministry, that we should learn to speak Spanish, that we should do the services in Spanish, because there are a lot of Hispanic people who um, are Episcopal and who need to hear their own language. Um, so I asked the dean, I said, but do I seem like the kind of person that could go to seminary? He said, absolutely. You're just our kind of person. So I was admitted. I go back to the Bahamas. I get all my clothes. I fly to Fort Lauderdale. I buy a car.
Are you still married at this point?
No, I was divorced by then for a year. Um, and I drive to Austin, Texas, through, I might say, Waco, Texas, which was going through the Branch Davidian thing. So I'm terrified. Oh my God, these people are nutballs in Texas. Do I really want to go there? I'd never been to Texas in my life. But the dean's wife pretty much adopted me. And within a year, I had put up plastic blow molded replicas of Jesus and the whole family for Christmas displays, and talked about the differences between the two different Christmases. Had Christmas lights all over the campus. Found a young lady who lived under the bridge a block away who I was ministering to. I mean, I just went on doing whatever it was that I was doing through seminary. And meanwhile, trying to find another bishop who would take me over. I was the only one in my class of 70 kids who was not handed my diploma by the bishop who was employing them and taking them on to their place, because I didn't have a bishop.
So were they all much younger than you?
No, actually, 3/4 of my class was women my age.
Oh, wow.
It was fabulous. And P.S., so were all the people who ran the seminary. So when a friend of mine and I decided that we needed to subvert some of the ideas that were going on, and we bought a bunch of flamingos and put them out with messages on them when we wanted stuff to happen on campus. All of the faculty or the people who worked in the seminary somehow helped us plasticize the messages and get everything organized. No one ever found out the whole time we were there who was really doing it, but all the secretaries knew in the seminary what was happening.
So what did you feel like leaving your husband behind and moving on?
It was what was really scary for me was moving to Texas. I didn't know a single person. I mean, I had never been to Texas. And I had a really hard time the first couple of weeks because I had lived on this island for 15 years that had grocery stores as small as this table. And the first week I was there, I go to HEB, which is the Stop and Shop there, and it's like a half an acre building. And I practically had a nervous breakdown. I mean, I'm used to like 3
Were you
cans of
doubting yourself?
beans.
Were you doubting yourself?
I
in those
wasn't doubting myself. I was doubting what kind of life I had entered into. I mean, I was willing to go through it. This was the ultimate adventure. Nothing was familiar.
Was it more of an adventure than the boat?
Yeah.
Feels it when you say it. Wow.
Yeah, because it was the real world. It's the first time that I had done something that wasn't my own little world. I had stepped
Wow.
into the Episcopal box. And, all my life I had been an outsider. I'd been a hippie. I had always worked with people who were on the outside. I'd never had a regular job and, done a 9-to-5er. And this was a serious different thing for me to do. But I thought it's about time. I think I'm strong enough now. It's about time I went into the inside and worked from the inside. Because there's only so much you can do from the outside. Of
Exactly.
course, now there's a million things you can do. You know, it's a very different. I mean, when Bailey and I lived on the boat, there were no computers, there were no cell phones. You know, it was a whole different world. So for the first time, I placed myself under the authority of a really large entity, a large, powerful entity. I didn't realize how large and powerful it was right away, but I got it after a while. But fortunately, the Bishop of Texas saw that I was an entrepreneur and a starter, and he wanted to start a spirituality center, a retreat center in Galveston. So he invites me into his office and he said, listen, I got an idea for you. You're not the average profile for a downtown Houston
Minister.
priest. How would you feel about being on an island in the Gulf with palm trees? And I said, are you kidding me? Is this a joke? That's what I came from. When can I go? I mean, this would be fabulous. I love islanders. They're all pirates. It's just so much fun living with them. So I went to Galveston and started the retreat center. And of course, being a woman priest, you're given 4 jobs. You're not given 1 job. All the women I knew had 4 different jobs. So I was the chaplain to the University of Texas Medical Branch, which I thought, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, what I was supposed to do was visit everybody else's parishioners because they didn't want to have to come down to Galveston to visit them. But what else I got to do was to introduce, there was a grant program going on that I stepped into to introduce non-conventional medical techniques and people who represented them to the medical department.
Like holistic wellness.
So I get to meet people who are doing alternative medicine. I mean, that's a whole 150 stories of fabulous, the Dalai Lama's chief chanter, you know, all kinds of people who I got to meet as a result of running this program in Galveston.
The Dalai Lama's
Chief chanter.
yes, and
so I brought him to Galveston, to the medical center, to show them that the way that he vibrated his voice in his chanting could make you go to sleep, could enliven you, could quicken your heart rate. I mean, this was like the greatest part of my job to do stuff like this.
before I forget, we the first weekend in November, we're having the Dalai Lama's retired head physician up to Rhode Island. And Peggy and I go to him. And
Wow.
because of COVID, we hadn't been able to go down, and our friends were asking us, is there any chance he could come up? So we invited him up, and he's coming. And that's exactly it. The herbs that he prescribes, then he chants over the herbs after he interviews you.
Wow.
And that's what really makes this stuff work. And it's not Band-Aid therapy. I mean, it's going to the root of it
Oh my gosh.
so that it goes away.
I mean, while I was in the Bahamas, I was also coming back to the States to learn Barbara Brennan's healing touch. I went and took a class on remote viewing. I mean, I'd been doing some expanding because of the Hot Bible. I thought there's something going on here in this world. that's manipulating physical reality. I want to know more about this stuff.
Oh my God.
I've already gotten a
Posy.
request for episode 2 from some of our viewers.
Yeah,
So.
Posy. I mean, we're already so far over.
Well,
You got to promise to come back,
Well, come back.
and then we'll continue this story.
I mean, the point is, you just never know.
Yet,
Doors open. If you show the universe that you're willing to walk through, more doors will open up than you could possibly ever get through. I mean, I'm
Yes.
not a genius. I don't know any of these people, but I said yes.
you said yes.
I said yes. I kept saying yes, and it kept getting better and better and more far out and more interesting. And now I know for sure that people here on Earth can talk to people on the other side because I've met people who do this. I mean, the world is an astounding place, and we're just not told about any of this stuff, and it's too good to miss.
and my God, we didn't even talk about that, about what you think what happens when we get on the other side. But we'll have to save that for next time.
We'll take it up the next time.
We'll take it up.
Just don't ever say no. It's a negative. You don't want to go there. Just say yes to everything. What could happen? You could have an incredibly interesting life.
You could be sitting here in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, that you'd even know where it was in a barn,
Exactly.
sharing.
I feel like I've been airlifted into some magic kingdom.
Your next one.
Well, I have no idea what this place looks like, actually.
Oh, that's right.
sunlight.
Right.
I
Okay.
came here in the dark thanks to GPS, just
You'll be
laser guided.
You'll be very surprised, I think, in the light. So, on that note, everyone, join us back on Tuesday. Thank you.
Well, thank
Posy.
you for inviting me because
you.
you didn't know at the time that I would say yes.
I didn't, and I tracked you down.
And you tracked me down.
But-
I was very impressed with that.
Yes, I was following my heart and wanted you to say yes.
Thank you so much. I
So-
know that what you're doing here is so expansive and transformative. And that's what life's really all about.
100%. Thank you. Good night, everyone. See you Tuesday.
Good night. Say yes.
Say yes.